Miss Parker, will you marry my daddy? He's so lonely. The day a kindergarten teacher met the billionaire single father who would change her life forever. Miss Parker, will you marry my daddy? The words came out in a whisper, but they hit me like a scream. I looked up from the picture book in my hands to find Phoebe Thorne standing beside my reading chair, her small body trembling, tears streaming down her heart-shaped face, her stuffed rabbit, the one with the missing eye and the fur worn down to threads, hung from her grip like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. He's so lonely, Miss Parker. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, her hazel eyes holding a desperation that no 5-year-old should ever have to carry. He cries when he thinks I'm sleeping. He stares at pictures of Mommy until his eyes go all empty and dark. I think he's dying inside, and I don't know how to save him. I'm listening to this child, this kindergartner who should be worried about sharing crayons and learning to tie her shoes, and she's asking me to marry her father, a man I've barely spoken to beyond quick hellos at pickup time. And the worst part, the part that terrifies me more than anything, is that some broken piece of my heart is actually considering it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a carefully controlled kindergarten teacher, who swore she'd never risk her heart again, ended up in the most unexpected love story of her life. Because this isn't just about a lonely billionaire or a desperate child. This is about what happens when a 5-year-old sees the truth that 2 broken adults are too scared to admit. This is about second chances, impossible questions, and the day everything. I thought I knew about love got turned completely upside down. My name is Briar Parker, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let a child teach you how to hope again. 3 months earlier, I stood in my kindergarten classroom at Meadowbrook Elementary, arranging construction paper into perfect stacks. Everything in my life existed in perfect stacks, organized, predictable, safe. The alphabet rug stretched across the reading corner, worn thin from 7 years of small bodies settling in for story time. The morning sun filtered through windows decorated with student artwork, 25. Interpretations of family that I'd helped guide without ever sharing my own story. Because I didn't have a story. Not anymore. Not since Daniel. I checked my watch. 7:45. 15 minutes before my students would burst through that door with their chaotic energy and their honest questions and their complete inability to lie. That's why I loved kindergartners. They were incapable of deception. When they loved you, they said it. When they were angry, they showed it. When they were scared, they cried. No hidden agendas. No secret families tucked away in other states. Briar, you need to let it go. That was 3 years ago. My best friend Mallory's voice echoed in my head from our conversation the night before. You can't punish every man on earth because Daniel turned out to be a sociopath. I'm not punishing anyone, I told her, organizing my already organized bookshelf. I'm just choosing safety. You're choosing loneliness. Maybe the first was. But loneliness was predictable. Loneliness couldn't wake you up at 3 a.m. with a confession that your entire relationship had been a lie. Loneliness couldn't introduce you to the wife and 2 children you never knew existed. Loneliness couldn't make you question every decision, every instinct, every moment of happiness you thought you'd experienced. So yes, I chose loneliness. I chose my classroom, and my students, and my carefully constructed walls. The children started arriving at 8 o'clock sharp. Madison Cooper bounced in first, her blonde pigtails swinging as she announced that her cat had thrown up on her dad's shoes. Tommy Richards followed, proudly displaying a loose tooth that was hanging by what appeared to be sheer determination. Rosie Chen showed off her new light-up sneakers. Marcus Webb wanted everyone to know he'd eaten pancakes for breakfast. And then Phoebe Thorne walked in, holding her father's hand. I'd noticed Phoebe from the first day of school. Not just because her file noted that her mother had died 2 years prior, not just because she was whip-smart and perceptive beyond her years, but because she watched people, really watched them, like she was trying to solve puzzles that adults couldn't even see. Good morning, Phoebe. I smiled at her, then glanced up at her father. Mr. Thorne. Callahan, please. His voice was deep, tired. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But his eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that no amount of money could fix. Have a good day, Phoebe B. Bye, Daddy. Phoebe hugged his legs, then watched him leave with an expression that made my chest ache. She turned to me with those 2 old eyes. Miss Parker, do you think grown-ups know when they're sad? I knelt down to her level. What do you mean, sweetheart? Like sometimes I think my daddy doesn't know how sad he is. She clutched her rabbit tighter. He smiles at me, but his eyes don't smile. They stay sad even when his mouth is happy. I felt something crack in my carefully constructed walls. Sometimes grown-ups are very good at hiding how they feel, I said carefully, even from themselves. Phoebe nodded like I'd just confirmed something she'd suspected. That's what I thought too. The morning passed in the usual rhythm of kindergarten chaos. We practiced writing letters. We counted manipulatives. We sang songs about days of the week and months of the year, but I kept noticing Phoebe watching me. Not in a creepy way, but with a focused intensity that made me self-conscious. During art time, while the other children painted enthusiastic representations of their pets, Phoebe created something different. A careful, detailed picture of 3 figures, one tall with dark hair, one smaller with a yellow dress, and one medium-sized with brown hair pulled back. "That's beautiful, Phoebe," I said, admiring her work. "Tell me about it." "That's my daddy." She pointed to the tall figure. "That's me." She pointed to the small one. "And that's you." I felt my breath catch. "Me? You look pretty in yellow," Phoebe said matter-of-factly. "And you're good at making people feel better when they're sad. Like last week when Marcus fell and scraped his knee, and you didn't just put a Band-Aid on it. You told him that brave people still cry sometimes, and that made him feel okay about crying." I remember that. My mommy used to say stuff like that. Phoebe's voice got quiet. Before she died, she was really good at knowing what people needed to hear. "Your mommy sounds like she was a very special person." She was. Phoebe looked up at me with those penetrating eyes. She told me before she died that I had to take care of Daddy, that I had to make sure he didn't stay sad forever. She said he deserved to love someone again. The words hung in the air between us. Around us, children chattered and laughed and created their messy masterpieces. But in our small bubble, something significant was shifting. "That's a big responsibility for a little girl," I said gently. "I know." Phoebe went back to adding details to her painting. "That's why I've been looking for someone who could help." The rest of the day, her words echoed in my mind. By the time quiet reading time arrived at 2:30, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the weight of that conversation. That's when Phoebe approached me with her impossible question. "Miss Parker, will you marry my daddy? He's so lonely." I set down the copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar I'd been reading to a group of students. The other children were scattered around the room, absorbed in their books or playing quietly in learning centers. Phoebe stood in front of me, her whole body shaking with the courage it had taken to ask. "Phoebe, honey." I kept my voice gentle. "Marriage isn't something we can arrange for other people. Your daddy has to fall in love on his own. But he won't." Her voice cracked. "All the ladies at his work try to talk to him. The lady at the coffee shop gives him free cookies every morning. Mrs. Henderson from our building brings him dinner twice a week. But he doesn't see any of them. He just says thank you in his polite voice and goes back to being sad." I glanced around to make sure the other children weren't listening. "Why me, Phoebe?" "There are lots of nice women in the world. Because you're different." She said it with such certainty. "I've been watching you, Miss Parker. You're kind even when you're tired. You notice when people are sad, and you know how to make them feel better, without making them feel embarrassed about being sad in the first place." She took a step closer. "And you're lonely too. I can tell. You smile at us kids all the time. A real smile. But when parents come to pick us up, and they're talking to each other about their husbands and wives, you get this look, like you're remembering something that makes you sad." I felt tears prick my eyes. This child saw too much. "My mommy used to smell like vanilla and cinnamon." Phoebe continued. "And you smell like that too. And our house used to smell like that before Mommy died, and now it just smells like cleaning stuff and sadness." She looked at me with desperate hope. "I think if Daddy met you, really met you, he might remember what it feels like to not be sad." "Sweetheart, I'm your teacher. There are rules about—" "I know about rules," Phoebe interrupted. "But Mommy said that some rules are about protecting people, and some rules are just about people being scared of what's different. She said the important thing is to know which kind of rule you're following." Before I could respond, the classroom door opened and Callahan Thorne walked in. I'd seen him dozens of times during the first months of school. Brief glimpses, quick exchanges, hurried signatures on permission slips, but I'd never really looked at him. I deliberately avoided looking too closely at any of the single fathers in my class because looking led to wondering. And wondering led to hoping, and hoping led to the kind of devastation I'd sworn never to experience again. Now, caught off guard by Phoebe's confession, I saw him clearly. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it all day. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders, but it was his eyes that stopped me. Storm gray, exhausted, carrying a depth of sadness that matched exactly what Phoebe had described. And something else, something that suggested he'd once been happy, that he knew what joy felt like, which somehow made the grief more devastating. Phoebe B. His whole face transformed when he saw his daughter. His voice softened, the weariness lifting slightly. "Ready to go, sweetheart?" "Daddy." Phoebe grabbed his hand, then grabbed mine with her other hand. "Daddy, this is Miss Parker. I know you know who she is, but really, this is Miss Parker. She's the best teacher in the whole entire world." Callahan's eyes met mine, and I felt something electric pass between us. Recognition, perhaps, or just the shared understanding of two people carrying grief they thought no one else could see. "Mr. Thorne," I managed, extending my hand. "Callahan, please." His grip was firm and warm, lasting just a fraction longer than necessary. "And thank you. Phoebe talks about you constantly. Miss Parker said this, Miss Parker did that. You've clearly made quite an impression. Your daughter is exceptional," I said honestly, looking down at Phoebe, who was beaming like she'd just orchestrated something brilliant. "She's kind, creative, and remarkably perceptive for her age. She gets that from her mother," Callahan said quietly, and I saw the flash of pain cross his face before he could mask it. The practiced grief of someone who'd learned to function while broken. "Daddy." Phoebe's voice took on a tone of manufactured innocence that would have been comical if it weren't so transparent. "Miss Parker doesn't have any dinner plans tonight. I asked her earlier." My eyes widened. "Phoebe, and you said we could get pizza tonight, remember?" Phoebe continued, ignoring my protest. "And pizza is always better with friends, right? That's what you always tell me." Callahan looked mortified. "Phoebe, Miss Parker is your teacher. She has her own life and her own plans. You can't just—" Actually, the word came out of my mouth before my brain could stop it. "Pizza sounds lovely." Both Thorns stared at me. Callahan with surprise, Phoebe with triumphant joy. "If you're sure," Callahan said carefully. I don't want you to feel obligated. My daughter is apparently operating under the delusion that she can arrange other people's social calendars." "I'm sure," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. Something about this man's obvious discomfort, about Phoebe's desperate hope, about the whole impossible situation made me want to say yes. Made me want to be brave for the first time in 3 years. Phoebe squeezed both our hands. "This is going to be the best dinner ever." 20 minutes later, I was following a Tesla in my beat-up Honda Civic, questioning every decision that had led me to this moment. "What are you doing, Briar?" I asked myself out loud. "You don't do this. You don't have dinner with parents. You don't blur boundaries. You definitely don't respond to matchmaking attempts by kindergartners." But something in Phoebe's desperation had cracked through my defenses. And something in Callahan's eyes, that recognition of shared grief, had made me want to take a risk. The pizzeria was family-owned, tucked into a neighborhood corner I'd driven past 100 times but never visited. Inside, it was warm and loud, filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, and a crackling wood-fire oven. Red-checkered tablecloths covered mismatched tables. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce and fresh basil filled the air, nothing like the sterile, upscale restaurants Daniel had preferred, where conversations were conducted in whispers and genuine laughter was considered gauche. "This is perfect," I said as we settled into a worn wooden booth. Phoebe immediately scooted to sit between us. "We come here every Friday," she announced. "It's our tradition. Daddy says traditions are important because they help you remember the good stuff even when you're having a hard day." "That's very wise," I said, looking at Callahan. He shrugged, looking self-conscious. "My therapist suggested establishing routines after Annalise died. Pizza Fridays became our thing. The casual mention of therapy, the ease with which he said his late wife's name. It suggested a man who'd done the work of grief, who wasn't trying to pretend the past hadn't happened." "Annalise," I said gently. "What a beautiful name." "She was beautiful," Callahan said, and there was no performative sadness in his voice. Just simple truth, inside and out. Kind, Funny, completely unpretentious despite coming from old money. She kept me grounded when my business started taking off. What do you do? I asked. I run Thorn Capital Management. We handle investment portfolios for high net worth individuals and corporations. He said it the way someone might say they worked in accounting. Matter of fact, slightly apologetic. It's boring stuff really. Numbers and projections and risk assessments. Nothing as important as shaping young minds. Daddy has so much money, Phoebe announced with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. But he says money can't buy happiness, and I think he's right because we have lots of money and he's still sad. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Callahan's face go pale, watched him struggle with how to respond to his daughter's devastating observation. Phoebe, I said gently, reaching across to touch her hand. Sometimes grown-ups feel sad because they miss someone they love very much. That's a different kind of sadness. It's not about money or things. It's about love. I know, Phoebe said matter-of-factly. Daddy misses Mommy. I miss her too. But Mommy used to say that the best way to honor people we love is to keep living and keep loving. That's what she told Daddy before she died. I heard them talking. Callahan's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. I didn't know you. I didn't realize you remembered that conversation. I remember lots of things, Phoebe said. I remember Mommy smelled like vanilla. I remember she used to sing off-key in the kitchen and you'd laugh and tell her. She sounded like a cat stuck in a drain pipe, and she'd throw dish towels at you. I remember she had a really big laugh that came from her belly. I remember she told you it was okay to love someone new someday, that she wanted you to be happy. A single tear slid down Callahan's cheek. He wiped it away quickly, but not before I saw it. Saw the grief, yes, but also something else. Relief, perhaps, that his daughter's memories of her mother weren't fading. That Annalise was still present in their lives in a way that was healthy rather than haunting. Your Mommy sounds like she was an extraordinary woman, I said to Phoebe, feeling my own throat tighten. She was. Callahan's voice was rough. She threw elaborate tea parties for Phoebe with mismatched cups and stuffed animals. She volunteered at homeless shelters and animal rescues and never wanted any recognition for it. She laughed at my terrible jokes and called me out when I got too focused on work. He smiled sadly. She would have absolutely loved that you're Phoebe's teacher. She always said teachers were the real heroes, that anyone could make money, but it took someone special to shape young souls. I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening of the tight grip I'd kept on my own emotions. Can I tell you something? I heard myself say. Both Thorns looked at me with identical expressions of curiosity. I was engaged once. The words came out easier than I expected. 3 years ago. We'd been together for 4 years, and I thought I knew him completely. Thought we wanted the same things. Marriage, children, a quiet life, building something meaningful together. What happened? Phoebe asked, her eyes wide. I found out he was already married. I said simply. He had an entire other family 2 states away. A wife, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. I paused, still feeling the echo of that humiliation. I don't even know what I was. An escape, maybe. A diversion. A stupid, naive woman who believed every lie he told. Callahan's expression had gone dark. That's unconscionable. It broke something in me. I admitted, surprised by how good it felt to say it out loud. Not just my trust in him, but my trust in myself. I'd been so certain, so confident that I knew him, that what we had was real. When it all fell apart, I realized I'd been living in a complete fantasy. Every memory I had was contaminated by his deception. I looked at Phoebe. That's why I became a kindergarten teacher. I could love and nurture and pour myself into my students without risking my heart again. Children don't have hidden agendas. They can't betray you the way adults can. That's so sad, Phoebe said, reaching for my hand. You deserve to be loved for real, Miss Parker. Not fake loved by a lying liar. Despite the heaviness of the conversation, I laughed. Lying liar is exactly right, Phoebe. So, you've been alone since then? Callahan asked carefully. By choice? By necessity, I corrected. I'm not brave enough to risk it again. Callahan was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying me with an intensity that made my skin warm. I think you're braver than you know, he said finally. You show up every day for 25 kindergartners, including my emotionally perceptive daughter who apparently has no boundaries when it comes to personal questions. You pour yourself into other people's children. You let yourself care even though caring always comes with the risk of loss. That takes tremendous courage. It's different, I protested. Children are honest, straightforward. What you see is what you get. No, Callahan said gently. They just have very obvious agendas. He glanced at Phoebe with wry affection. Unlike adults, who hide their agendas behind social niceties and carefully constructed lies. The waiter arrived, breaking the intensity of the moment. We ordered a large pepperoni pizza, garlic knots, a Caesar salad. Phoebe requested extra cheese with the seriousness of someone ordering at a Michelin star restaurant. As we waited for our food, Phoebe chattered about school, about how Tommy Richards had finally learned to tie his shoes after weeks of practice, about the butterfly garden they were planning in the spring, about her best friend Rosie's new puppy, who was apparently both adorable and completely untrained. I watched Callahan as he listened to his daughter. The way his entire face softened, the way he gave Phoebe his complete attention despite the phone that kept buzzing in his pocket. This was a man who loved his child more than anything in the world, who'd somehow managed to stay present and engaged despite his grief. You're staring, Callahan said quietly while Phoebe was distracted by the arrival of garlic knots. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Sorry, I was just thinking that Phoebe is lucky to have you. Sometimes I'm not sure about that, Callahan said, his voice low. I'm terrified every single day that I'm screwing her up, that she needs things I can't give her, that I'm not enough. She doesn't need you to be perfect, I said. She needs exactly what you're already giving her. Presence, consistency, love. The rest is just details. His eyes met mine again, and something passed between us. Understanding, recognition, the beginning of something that felt dangerous and inevitable. The pizza arrived, and Phoebe attacked it with enthusiasm. Sauce ended up on her chin, cheese stretched in long strings, her joy completely unself-conscious. Callahan and I ate more carefully, stealing glances at each other when we thought the other wasn't looking. Miss Parker, Phoebe said suddenly, setting down her third slice. Do you like my daddy? Phoebe. Callahan's voice held a warning. What? She blinked innocently. I'm just asking. It's important to know if people like each other before you can be friends. Your father seems like a very nice man, I said diplomatically. But do you like him? Phoebe persisted. Like, do you think he's funny and smart and good at taking care of people? I think. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I think your father is clearly devoted to you, and he's been very kind this evening. And yes, he seems both funny and smart. See, Daddy? Phoebe turned to Callahan triumphantly. She likes you. Callahan looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. I'm going to have a very long talk with you about boundaries, young lady. But Phoebe was undeterred. And, Daddy, do you like Miss Parker? Callahan's eyes found mine, and I saw something in them that made my heart race. Yes, Phoebe. I like Miss Parker very much. The air between us seemed to thicken. Around us the restaurant buzzed with life and noise and movement, but in our small booth, time seemed to slow. Good, Phoebe announced, completely satisfied. Then we should do this again, maybe next week. We'll see, sweetheart, Callahan said, but he was still looking at me. If Miss Parker wants to, I'd like that, I heard myself say. I'd like that very much. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of easy conversation and comfortable silences. We talked about books, about movies, about the ridiculous politics of kindergarten parents and the equally ridiculous politics of the finance world. Callahan was easy to talk to, intelligent without being condescending, successful without being arrogant, grieving without being bitter, and Phoebe watched us both with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just successfully completed a difficult mission. When we finally left the restaurant, Phoebe was yawning but triumphant. Thank you for dinner, I said to Callahan in the parking lot. This was unexpected, but really lovely. Thank you for saying yes, he said. I know Phoebe put you on the spot, but I'm glad you came. Me too, Miss Parker. Phoebe's sleepy voice called from where Callahan had buckled her into her car seat. Will you come have dinner with us again? Please? I looked at Callahan, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe. Interest. Fear. I'd like that. If your daddy wants to. I want to, Callahan said immediately. then seemed to catch himself. I mean, Phoebe would love it, and I would too. As I drove home in my beat-up Honda, following the taillights of Callahan's Tesla until our paths diverged, I realized I was smiling. Really smiling. The kind that reached my eyes and made my cheeks hurt. The kind I hadn't experienced in 3 years. I was terrified. I was hopeful. I was, perhaps, ready to be brave again. Over the next 6 weeks, I found myself woven into the fabric of the Thorn household in ways that should have terrified me, but somehow felt inevitable. It started innocently enough. Callahan began arriving at pickup time a few minutes early. Instead of the rushed exchanges we'd had before, he lingered, asked about Phoebe's day, commented on the artwork displayed in the classroom, recommended a mystery novel when he noticed the Sue Grafton book on my desk. "Have you read Michael Connelly?" he asked one afternoon while Phoebe gathered her things. "The Harry Bosch series? I loved those," I said, surprised. I thought I was the only person under 60 who still read detective novels. "There are dozens of us," he said with a grin that transformed his entire face. Dozens. The conversations stretched longer each day. Other parents started giving us knowing looks. Melissa Cooper, Madison's mother, actually winked at me one afternoon. Jennifer Richards made a comment about how nice it was to see me connecting with parents. Principal Hendricks walked past my classroom one day during an extended conversation with Callahan and raised her eyebrows significantly. "I should probably go," Callahan would say reluctantly each day. "Let you get back to your planning." But the next day, he'd arrive even earlier. We discovered shared loves, classic films, jazz music, breakfast for dinner, long walks in the rain. We'd both been to Prague, though years apart. We both thought cilantro tasted like soap. We both believed that dogs were better than cats, though we'd both owned cats growing up. Phoebe watched these interactions with barely concealed delight. "You're really good at talking to my daddy," she told me one afternoon while working on a painting. "He smiles more now. Real smiles that reach his eyes." "We're just friends, sweetie," I said carefully. "That's how it starts," Phoebe said with the wisdom of someone far beyond her 5 years. Mommy always said friendship was the best foundation for love. The emergency call came at 11:47 on a Thursday night. I'd given Callahan my personal number after Phoebe had a minor playground accident, scraped knee, more scared than hurt. "For emergencies only," I'd said. This was the first time he'd used it. "Briar, I'm so sorry to call so late." His voice was strained, threaded with panic. "It's Phoebe. She's been throwing up for the past hour, fever of 102, and I can't get it down. I don't know if I should take her to the emergency room, or if this is normal sick or emergency sick, and I'm coming over," I said, already grabbing my keys. "You don't have to. I'm coming over," I repeated firmly. "Text me your address." The Thorn penthouse was in the luxury building downtown, the one with the doorman, and the marble lobby and the elevator that required a key card for the upper floors. The doorman called up to confirm my arrival, then directed me to the private elevator. I'd known Callahan was wealthy. The Tesla, the expensive suits, the casual mention of investment portfolios. But knowing and seeing were different things. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that belonged in design magazines, artwork that was probably worth more than my car. But it was also lived in. Phoebe's drawings covered the refrigerator, books scattered across surfaces, a well-loved stuffed rabbit on the couch, toys in a basket by the window. Callahan looked wrecked when he met me at the elevator, hair disheveled, button-down shirt untucked, barefoot, his eyes wild with worry. "Thank God you're here," he said. "I've been completely useless. I keep thinking about how Annalise would know exactly what to do, and Hey," I touched his arm gently. "You're doing great. Let me take a look at her." Phoebe's bedroom was perfect for a 5-year-old. Soft purple walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, bookshelves overflowing with picture books, and in the center, a small figure curled up in bed, pale and miserable. "Miss Parker." Phoebe's voice was weak. "You came." "Of course I came, sweetheart." I sat on the edge of her bed, feeling her forehead. She was definitely warm, but not dangerously so. "How are you feeling?" "My tummy hurts, and my head. And everything feels yucky." "I bet it does," I said gently. but I think I know what this is. 3 kids in our class went home with the stomach flu this week. It's awful, but it's not dangerous. You just need rest and lots of water, and someone to help you feel safe while you're feeling terrible. Callahan appeared in the doorway. Is she okay? She's going to be fine, I said. It's the bug that's going around school. Miserable, but not serious. I watched the tension drain from Callahan's shoulders. Oh, thank God, I thought. I didn't know. Annalise always handled the sick days. Well, now you've got backup, I said, standing. Do you have ginger ale? Saltines? Children's Tylenol? I think so. Callahan looked helpless. Maybe. Why don't you check? I'll stay with Phoebe. Over the next several hours, Callahan and I worked together in a way that felt startlingly natural. He brought supplies. I administered medicine. We took turns sitting with Phoebe, reading her favorite stories in soft voices, bringing her small sips of water, changing her sheets when necessary. At 4 a.m, with Phoebe finally sleeping peacefully, I found Callahan, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. Thank you, he said without turning around. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come. You would have figured it out, I said, joining him at the window. You're a good father, Callahan. I'm terrified every single day, he admitted. Terrified that I'm screwing her up, that she needs things I can't give her, that I can't be enough for her. She doesn't need you to be enough, I said gently. She needs what you already are. Present, devoted, willing to call for help when you need it. Callahan turned to look at me, his eyes intense in the dim light. When Phoebe asked you to marry me that first day, God, I was so mortified. But now, he stopped, shook his head. Now what? I prompted, my heart suddenly racing. Now I can't stop thinking that maybe she saw something I was too scared to see myself. He took a step closer. You're extraordinary, Briar Parker, not just as a teacher, but as a person. You're kind and wise and brave. So much braver than you give yourself credit for. Callahan, these past weeks, having you in our lives, he continued, it's like color coming back into a world that's been gray for too long. It's like remembering what it feels like to look forward to something instead of just getting through each day. I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said. I just needed you to know. I'm falling for you, Briar. Maybe I started falling that first day when you were kind to my daughter, even when she was asking you impossible questions. Maybe it was when you trusted me enough to share your own pain. Maybe it's been happening gradually, with every conversation and every smile. He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. I know it's complicated, he continued. I know you're scared. I know I come with a lot of baggage, grief, and a precocious 5-year-old, and a life that's probably very different from what you're used to. But I also know that what I feel for you is real. I'm terrified, I whispered. I know. I swore I'd never do this again. I know, but I'm falling for you too, I admitted. For both of you. And it scares me to death because what if? What if I'm not like him? Callahan interrupted gently. What if I'm exactly who I appear to be? A widowed father who's been stumbling through grief and loneliness until an extraordinary kindergarten. Teacher showed him that it's possible to honor the past while still reaching for the future. What if I'm not enough? I asked, all my fears spilling out. What if Phoebe needs more than I can give? What if I can't? You're not supposed to replace anyone, Callahan said firmly. Annalise will always be Phoebe's mother, always. But there's room in our hearts, in our lives, for you to be something wonderful too. Whatever that looks like, whatever you're comfortable with. I don't know how to do this, I said helplessly. Neither do I, Callahan admitted. But maybe we can figure it out together. He leaned down slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. When I didn't, when I actually leaned in, his kiss was gentle, reverent, full of promise and hope, and the tentative beginning of something that felt like healing. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. This is crazy, I whispered. Probably, he agreed. Your daughter asked me to marry you after knowing me for a few months. She's very perceptive. I'm a kindergarten teacher. You're a billionaire. We live in completely different worlds. Do we? Callahan asked. Because right now, at 4 a.m, with my sick daughter finally sleeping and you standing, Here, having given up your entire night to help us, it feels like we're in exactly the same world." He had a point. The next morning, Phoebe woke up feeling much better. She found Callahan and me asleep on the couch, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me. "I knew it," she said triumphantly. "I knew you were supposed to love each other." Over the following weeks, word spread through the kindergarten parent community with the speed of wildfire in a drought. Miss Parker was dating Phoebe Thorne's billionaire father. Some parents were thrilled. "You two are perfect together," Melissa Cooper gushed. "Phoebe seems so happy." Jennifer Richards gave me a knowing smile every afternoon. Even gruff Marcus Webb's father offered a gruff congratulations. But others were scandalized. "Isn't that inappropriate?" I overheard Karen Sullivan whisper to another parent, "Should she really be teaching his daughter while they're involved? I wonder if Phoebe gets special treatment now." Another voice murmured. The pointed questions started. Comments about conflicts of interest. Suggestions that perhaps Phoebe should be moved to another classroom. Thinly veiled accusations about my professionalism. I handled it all with as much grace as I could muster. Maintained clear boundaries in the classroom. Treated Phoebe exactly as I treated every other student, maybe even held her to slightly higher standards to avoid any appearance of favoritism. Principal Hendricks called me in for a meeting. "Breyer," she folded her hands on her desk, "I need to discuss the optics of your relationship with Mr. Thorne." I felt my stomach drop. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," she said quickly. "But we do need to address the concerns some parents have raised. Questions about appropriateness, conflicts of interest, whether Phoebe should remain in your classroom." I maintained professional boundaries. I said firmly, "I've never given Phoebe preferential treatment. If anything, I'm harder on her to avoid any appearance of favoritism." "I know that," Hendricks said, "and I've observed your classroom. I see no evidence of inappropriate behavior. But perception matters, Breyer. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that as long as you continue to maintain those boundaries, your personal life is your own business." She smiled. "For what it's worth, I think it's wonderful. That child has been through so much. If she's found a way to build a new family, who are we to judge?" The relief was overwhelming. "Thank you. Just keep doing what you're doing," Hendricks said, "and ignore the gossips. They'll find something new to talk about soon enough." Phoebe naturally was thrilled to the point of combustion. "I knew it," she announced to anyone who would listen during sharing time. "I told Miss Parker to marry my daddy, and now they're in love. I'm very good at knowing things." Tommy Richards raised his hand. "My mom says you shouldn't brag." "I'm not bragging," Phoebe said seriously. "I'm just telling the truth. There's a difference, but it wasn't all smooth sailing." 3 months into our relationship, Callahan invited me to attend a charity gala with him. "Some finance industry thing," he'd said. "Boring speeches and overpriced wine, but it would mean a lot if you'd come with me." I'd said yes before fully considering what I was agreeing to. The dress arrived a week before the event, delivered to my apartment by a woman from a boutique I'd never heard of but that Callahan apparently knew well. "Mr. Thorne asked me to bring you several options," the woman said, wheeling in a rack of gowns that probably cost more than my car. "I can't accept these," I protested. "He anticipated you'd say that." She smiled. "He asked me to tell you that this is a necessary business expense. The event has a formal dress code and he'd like you to feel comfortable." I tried on 7 dresses before finding one that felt like me. Midnight blue silk that hugged in the right places and flowed in others. Elegant, but not ostentatious. The price tag made me feel sick. $4,000 for a dress I'd wear once. "It's perfect," the boutique woman said. "You look stunning." Stunning felt like an overstatement, but I had to admit, I looked good. The night of the gala, Callahan picked me up in a car that wasn't his Tesla. A sleek black town car with a driver. "You look." He stopped when he saw me, his eyes widening. "Breathtaking. You look absolutely breathtaking. You clean up pretty well yourself," I said, taking in his tuxedo. Custom tailored, obviously, making him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. The gala was held at the Natural History Museum. We arrived to valet parking in a red carpet, actual photographers, people, in gowns and tuxedos that probably cost more than my annual salary. I felt immediately out of my depth. Inside, the museum had been transformed. The dinosaur hall was filled with round tables draped in white linens. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. A string quartet played in one corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that were more art than food. Callahan, there you are. A silver-haired man in an expensive tux approached us. We've been waiting for you to arrive. Richard. Callahan shook his hand. This is Briar Parker. Briar, Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Financial. Pleasure. Richard's eyes assessed me quickly. What do you do, Briar? I'm a kindergarten teacher, I said, lifting my chin slightly. How nice. Richard's tone suggested it was anything but. Callahan, we need to discuss the Henderson account. And just like that, I was invisible. Over the next hour, I was introduced to dozens of people. Executives and entrepreneurs and old money socialites. I smiled and made polite conversation and tried not to feel completely out of place. But the truth was, I didn't belong here. These people discussed vacation homes in Aspen and yachts in the Mediterranean, and charity boards like they were discussing the weather. They dropped names of designers and restaurants and exclusive clubs. They spoke a language I didn't understand, built on wealth and privilege and a life I'd never lived. Callahan stayed close, introducing me proudly. This is Briar, the most important person in my life. But he kept getting pulled into conversations about markets and portfolios and business dealings I couldn't follow. I found myself standing alone near the champagne fountain, nursing a glass of wine that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. That's when I heard them. 2 women in designer gowns, dripping with diamonds, their voices carrying just far enough. Did you see Callahan Thorne's new girlfriend? The first woman said. The kindergarten teacher? How quaint. The second woman laughed. I'm sure it's just a phase. Slumming, you know. Men do that sometimes. He needs someone who understands his world. The first woman continued. Someone sophisticated enough to handle the social obligations. Someone who can hold a conversation about more than finger painting and nap time. Poor thing probably thinks he's serious about her, the second woman said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. But men like Callahan Thorne don't end up with elementary school teachers. They marry within their class. It's just how things work. Give it 6 months. The first woman predicted. He'll realize what he actually needs. Someone like Victoria Ashford. Did you see her here tonight? Now that's the kind of woman who belongs with someone like Callahan. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Every insecurity I'd buried came rushing back. Daniel's voice in my head. You're so naive, Briar. You actually thought someone like me would choose a life like yours? You're a placeholder, sweetheart. A distraction until I go back to my real life. The room suddenly felt too hot, too small, too full of people who knew I didn't belong. I set down my champagne glass with shaking hands and walked quickly toward the bathroom. The ladies' room was all marble and gold fixtures and fresh flowers. I locked myself in a stall and tried to breathe through the panic attack. You don't belong here. He's going to realize you're not enough. This is just like Daniel all over again. You're fooling yourself. The thoughts spiraled, each one worse than the last. By the time I managed to get myself under control enough to leave the stall, my mascara was running and my hands were shaking. I tried to fix my makeup, tried to pull myself together, but my reflection in the mirror showed the truth. A kindergarten teacher playing dress-up in a world where she'd never fit. I slid down to sit on the floor, not caring that my $4,000 dress was getting dirty. The panic was too overwhelming, the fear too consuming. That's where Callahan found me 10 minutes later. Briar. His voice was panicked. He was on his knees immediately. What happened? Are you hurt? Did someone? I don't belong here. The words came out choked. Those women are right. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I drive a 10-year-old Honda. I rent a 1-bedroom apartment in a building where the heat doesn't always work. I don't know which fork to use at fancy dinners. I can't talk about yacht clubs and summer homes in the Hamptons. This isn't my world. What women? Callahan's voice had gone hard. Who said something to you? It doesn't matter, I said. They're right. Look at this place. Look at these people. I don't fit here, Callahan. And eventually, you're going to realize that you need someone who does. Good, he said fiercely. Because I hate this world. I looked up at him in surprise. These shallow, vapid people who think money equals worth. He continued, his voice passionate. I've been pretending to fit in here for years because it's good for business, playing their games, attending their parties, smiling and nodding while they discuss meaningless garbage. He cupped my face in his hands. But you, Briar, you're real. You're genuine. You care about things that actually matter. Children's education and kindness and making the world better. You're worth 1,000 of these people. But what if they're right? I whispered. What if eventually you realize you need someone who fits better? Someone who... I need you, Callahan interrupted. Not some society princess who sees me as a bank account. Not someone who'll raise Phoebe to value appearances over substance. Not someone who fits into this world that I barely tolerate. He leaned his forehead against mine. I need you, the woman who stayed up all night with my sick daughter, who sees past the money to the person I actually am, who makes me laugh and think and feel alive for the first time in 2 years, who's teaching my daughter what really matters in life. You love me? My voice came out as a squeak. Desperately. Callahan confirmed. Completely. And I'm sorry I haven't said it before. I was trying not to scare you, but clearly that's backfired spectacularly. I love you too, I said through fresh tears. Happy ones this time. Even though you're absurdly wealthy, and I still can't figure out how to work your espresso machine. And sometimes I feel like I'm in a dream that I'm going to wake up from. You're not dreaming. Callahan kissed my forehead, then my nose, then my lips. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. We both are. We left the gala 20 minutes later, ignored the surprised looks from the society people, got in the town car and directed the driver to pick up Phoebe from Mrs. Henderson's apartment. The three of us ended up in our pajamas at midnight, eating ice cream directly from the cartons and watching Tangled for what Phoebe informed me was the 47th time. This is perfect, Phoebe announced, snuggled between us on the couch. This is what family looks like. And she was right. This was what love actually looked like. Not fancy galas and expensive dresses and performing for people who measured worth in dollar signs, but ice cream and animated movies and a 5-year-old falling asleep between two people who adored her. I looked at Callahan over Phoebe's head, saw the same realization in his eyes, the same gratitude, the same wonder that we'd found this despite all our fears and broken places. Thank you, I mouthed. For what? He mouthed back. For seeing me. Always. He promised. 6 months passed like pages turning in a favorite book. Slowly at first, then faster as the story became impossible to put down. The seasons changed. Winter gave way to spring, and spring blossomed into early summer. The classroom transformed with the weather. Paper snowflakes came down from the ceiling, replaced by construction paper flowers. The alphabet rug got a deep cleaning. 25 kindergartners grew taller, smarter, more confident. And I fell deeper in love. It happened in small moments. Callahan bringing me coffee every morning, always perfectly prepared with too much cream and 1 sugar. Phoebe saving her best artwork to hang on my refrigerator instead of hers. The three of us developing our own traditions. Saturday morning farmers market trips. Sunday afternoon movies. Wednesday night tacos because Phoebe had declared it Taco Wednesday and we didn't have the heart to correct her grammar. My apartment slowly accumulated evidence of them. Phoebe's spare clothes in my dresser for unexpected sleepovers. Callahan's reading glasses on my nightstand. A toothbrush that wasn't mine in the bathroom. Their presence woven into the fabric of my carefully constructed life until I couldn't remember what alone had felt like. Mallory noticed the change immediately. You're different, she said one afternoon when we met for coffee. You're lighter somehow, like someone untied weights you'd been carrying. I'm happy, I admitted, terrifyingly, completely happy. Good, she squeezed my hand. You deserve this, Briar. You deserve all of it. But happiness still scared me sometimes. Late at night, when Callahan slept beside me and the city lights painted shadows. Across the ceiling, I'd lie awake and wait for the other shoe to drop. For the reveal that this was all too good to be true. For the moment when he'd realize I wasn't enough. Callahan always knew when I was spiraling. Talk to me, he'd say, pulling me closer. Tell me what's going on in that beautiful, terrifying brain of yours. What if you change your mind? I whispered one night. What if you wake up and realize you made a mistake? Then I'd spend the rest of my life trying to correct that mistake by choosing you again. He said simply, every single day, Briar. I'd choose you every single day. The school year wound down. Field day arrived with relay races and water balloon tosses. The spring concert featured 25 kindergartners singing wildly off-key renditions of seasonal songs. Graduation approached. Tiny caps and gowns ordered. parents weeping over how fast their babies had grown. Phoebe was moving on to first grade, moving out of my classroom into the next phase of her education. "I'm going to miss being your student," she told me one afternoon during our end-of-year individual conferences. "But I'm glad I'll still get to be your family." "Me too, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tight. "Me too." The last day of school was chaos. Parents with cameras, children crying because they'd missed their friends, teachers passing students on to the next grade with pride and bitter sweetness. Callahan arrived at pickup time with flowers. "For the best teacher in the world," he said, presenting them with a flourish that made Phoebe giggle. "You're ridiculous," I said, accepting the bouquet. "But thank you. We have a celebration dinner planned," Phoebe announced. "Daddy made reservations at the fancy restaurant with the chocolate volcano cake." "Did he now?" I looked at Callahan with amusement. "It's a special occasion." He shrugged. "End of the school year. Phoebe graduating kindergarten. 6 months of us. 6 months. It felt like both forever and no time at all. That night at dinner, in the fancy restaurant where Phoebe ordered chocolate volcano, cake as her main course, and Callahan didn't even argue. Something shifted. We weren't just dating anymore. We weren't just testing the waters. We were building something permanent. "I have something for you," Callahan said, after Phoebe had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, chocolate smeared on her face. "Can you come up for a minute?" His penthouse felt like home now. I had a key, a drawer in his dresser, space in his closet, my books on his shelves, evidence of integration everywhere I looked. Callahan carried Phoebe to bed while I waited in the living room, looking out at the city lights that had become as familiar as my own reflection. "Okay," he said, returning. "Close your eyes. Callahan, trust me. Just close them." I did. Felt him take my hand. "Lead me somewhere in the apartment. Stop." "Okay." His voice was nervous. "You can open them." I opened my eyes to find myself in his bedroom. Except it had been transformed. Candles everywhere, rose petals scattered across the floor, photographs hung on strings across the room, images of the three of us over the past 6 months, at the farmer's market, watching movies, walking in the park. Each photo a moment I'd forgotten was being captured, but now treasured seeing preserved. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is me being terrified and hopeful and completely certain all at the same time," Callahan said. "This is me asking if you can see a future with us. Not just dating, not just seeing where things go, but really, truly building a life together." "Callahan, I know it's fast," he continued quickly. "I know we've only been together 6 months. I know the logical thing would be to wait longer, take more time, be absolutely certain. But Briar, I am certain. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He pulled a small box from his pocket, but didn't open it yet. "I'm not asking today," he said. "I'm not proposing right now because I want you to have time to think, time to be sure, time to not feel pressured or rushed or like you have to say yes because we're standing in this romantic setup and it would be awkward to say no." "Then, what are you doing?" I asked, tears already streaming down my face. "I'm telling you my intentions," he said. "I'm telling you that when you're ready, when you've had time to think and process and be absolutely certain, I'm going to ask you to marry me, to be Phoebe's stepmom, to build a family with us. And I wanted you to know that's where this is heading so you could decide if that's what you want too." He opened the box. Inside was the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. Simple, elegant, a single diamond on a delicate band. Perfect for someone who worked with 5-year-olds and couldn't wear anything too elaborate. "I bought this 2 months ago," Callahan admitted. "I've been carrying it around like a talisman, waiting for the right moment. But then I realized there is no perfect moment. There's just us and what we're building, and the question of whether you want to keep building it." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Take all the time you need, a week, a month, 6 months, however long you need to be certain. I just wanted you to know, to see where my heart is, to understand that this isn't casual for me. It never has been." I found my voice finally. "You're not asking me to marry you?" "Not yet," he said. "Not until you're ready." "What if I'm ready now?" Callahan's eyes widened. What if I don't need time to think?" I stepped closer to him. What if I've known for months that this is what I want? What if the only thing that's been stopping me from hoping for this is fear, and I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions? Briar, ask me, I said. Right now, ask me. Are you sure? He looked uncertain. I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure, I said firmly. I'm terrified and hopeful and completely certain all at the same time, just like you. Callahan took a shaky breath. Okay. He dropped to one knee right there among the candles and rose petals and photographs of our life together. Briar Parker, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I love you. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see the world. I love how you love my daughter like she's your own. I love how you make me want to be better, do better, live better. I love that you challenge me and support me and call me out when I'm being an idiot. I laughed through my tears. Will you marry me? He asked. Will you take a chance on us? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that some people are worth the risk? Yes. The word came out before he'd even finished asking. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring on my finger with shaking hands. Then he stood and kissed me like his life depended on it. Like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When we finally pulled apart, we were both crying. I can't believe you said yes, he whispered. I can't believe you asked. I said, I thought you were going to make me wait. I was. He laughed. But then you looked at me with those eyes and I couldn't help myself. We stood there in the candlelight, holding each other, marveling at what we'd just done. Should we tell Phoebe? I asked. In the morning, Callahan said. Tonight, let's just be us. But Phoebe, as it turned out, had other ideas. You asked her? A small voice came from the doorway. We both spun around to find Phoebe standing there in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Phoebe B. Callahan started. You should be asleep. Did she say yes? Phoebe ignored him completely, looking at me with hope blazing in her eyes. I held up my hand, showing her the ring. I said yes. Phoebe screamed, actually screamed with joy, launched herself at both of us. We caught her in a group hug, all three of us laughing and crying. I knew it. Phoebe said, I knew you were supposed to be our family. I'm very good at knowing things. Yes, you are, I agreed. You're very, very good at knowing things. We spent the rest of that night on the couch, Phoebe between us, too excited to sleep, planning a wedding with the elaborate vision of a 5-year-old. Can I be the flower girl? She asked. Of course. I said. Can I wear a sparkly dress? Absolutely. Can we have a chocolate cake? We can have anything you want. Callahan assured her. Can we have the wedding in Miss Parker's classroom? Phoebe asked suddenly. Because that's where it all started. That's where I asked you to marry Daddy. Callahan and I looked at each other. You know what? I said, that's actually perfect. That night, holding my new family close, I understood something fundamental. Love wasn't about perfect timing or logical decisions. Love was about choosing bravery over fear, about trusting that some people were worth the risk, about believing that broken pieces could be put back together into something even more beautiful than before. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of wedding planning, family integration, and learning to navigate engagement in the public eye. Mallory screamed when I told her, actually screamed in the middle of a coffee shop, causing several people to spill their drinks. I knew it, she said, grabbing my hand to examine the ring. I knew he was different. I knew you were going to say yes. Were you talking to Phoebe? I asked suspiciously. She said the exact same thing. Great minds. Mallory grinned. Now tell me everything. Every single detail. The announcement in the school district newsletter caused a minor sensation. Several parents sent congratulatory emails. A few sent concerned messages about boundaries and appropriateness. Principal Hendricks sent a bottle of champagne with a note that read, Finally, some good news. Planning a wedding in a kindergarten classroom presented unique challenges. We can't have too many guests. I told Callahan and Phoebe one Sunday afternoon while we brainstormed. The classroom only holds about 50 people comfortably. Then we only invite 50 people, Callahan said easily. The people who really matter. Phoebe was busy making lists. In crayon, naturally. Guest list. She read importantly. Grandma and Grandpa Thorne. Aunt Mallory. Miss Jennifer from school. Tommy and Marcus and Rosie and Madison from my class. All of your classmates? I asked, amused. They're my friends, Phoebe said seriously. Friends come to weddings. Fair point. Mrs. Henderson from our building. Phoebe continued. She always brings us cookies. And the doorman, Frank, because he always asks about Daddy's feelings. The wedding planning revealed differences in our worlds that we hadn't fully addressed. Callahan's mother called one evening to discuss the guest list. Darling, I've been thinking. Her cultured voice came through the speakerphone. We really should invite the Ashfords and the Morrisons. And the Hendersons, of course. Business relationships matter. Mom, Callahan said patiently. We're having a small wedding. 50 people, maximum. 50 people? His mother's voice rose. Callahan, that's barely enough for family and close friends. What about your business associates? Your college friends? The board members? I don't want a big society wedding, he said firmly. I want something intimate and meaningful. But darling, Mom, his voice was kind but unyielding. This is my wedding, mine and Briar's, and we're doing it our way. There was a long pause. Then more quietly, his mother said, You really love her, more than anything. Another pause. Then, well, she did raise Phoebe's reading level 2 years in 1 school year. That's quite impressive. Callahan laughed. High praise from you, Mom. After he hung up, I looked at him with concern. Are you sure about this? The small wedding, I mean. These are your people, your community. Those people aren't my community, he said, pulling me close. You are. Phoebe is. The friends who showed up when Annalise died, who checked in during the hard years, who genuinely care about us as people, not business contacts. That's my community. Everything else is just networking. Still, I hesitated. I don't want you to regret this years from now. Don't want you to resent me for not fitting into your world. Briar, he turned me to face him fully. I don't want to fit into that world. I never have. I've been performing for business purposes my entire adult life. This wedding, our marriage, our life together. That's not a performance. That's the most real thing I've ever done. The months flew by. Summer turned to fall. Leaves changed colors. The new school year started, and for the first time in 7 years, Phoebe wasn't in my classroom. She was in 1st grade, learning from Mrs. Morrison, thriving. But she still stopped by my classroom every afternoon. Just checking in, she'd say importantly, making sure my kindergarten friends are being good for you. The truth was, she was checking on me, making sure I was still there, still part of their lives, still planning to stay. I'm not going anywhere. I tell her every time. I promise. I moved into the penthouse officially in October, gave up my apartment with its unreliable heat and thin walls, packed up my life into boxes that looked impossibly small compared to the space I was moving into. Callahan tried to help but mostly got in the way. Where do you want these books? He asked, holding up a box. The bookshelf? Which bookshelf? We have 7. That's still weird to me, I admitted. Having 7 bookshelves. You have a lot of books. He pointed out, I wanted to make sure you had space for all of them. This small kindness, the fact that he'd cleared shelf space specifically for my books, it made me cry. Are you okay? He asked, alarmed. You made space for my books. I said, Of course I did. He looked confused. This is your home now. I want you to feel like it's yours. Phoebe adapted to the new arrangement with ease. Now Miss Parker can make us breakfast, she announced the first morning I woke up officially living there. This is perfect. I'm not a great cook, I warned her. That's okay, Phoebe said generously. Daddy burns everything anyway. You can be bad at cooking together. The wedding date approached. December 15th, a winter wedding in a kindergarten classroom. The week before, I woke up at 6:47 in the morning to Phoebe's face approximately 3 inches from mine. Miss Parker, she whispered urgently. Miss Parker, wake up. I groaned, squinting at the clock. Phoebe, it's so early. But it's important. She bounced on the bed. Daddy says we have a surprise. I looked over to find Callahan's side of the bed empty. Where is your dad? Downstairs. Come on. She grabbed my hand and pulled. I need coffee first. Daddy already made coffee. It's in the kitchen. Now come on. I let her pull me out of bed, still in my pajamas, hair probably sticking up in 17 different directions. Callahan was indeed in the kitchen, also in pajamas, holding a travel mug of coffee and looking both nervous and excited. "Good morning," he said, handing me the coffee. "Drink this. You're going to need it." "What's happening?" I asked suspiciously. "We're going somewhere," Phoebe announced. "It's a surprise. I don't like surprises before 7 in the morning. You'll like this one," Callahan promised. "Trust me." 20 minutes later, we were in the Tesla, Phoebe in the back, vibrating with excitement, Callahan driving with a mysterious smile, me in the passenger seat, trying to wake up enough to figure out what was happening. "Are we getting breakfast?" I guessed. "Nope," Phoebe said gleefully. "Are we going shopping for last-minute wedding stuff?" "Nope." "Are you going to tell me?" "Nope." We drove through the city as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, turned into a neighborhood I recognized, pulled up in front of Meadowbrook Elementary School. "Why are we at the school?" I asked. "You'll see," Callahan said, getting out of the car. Phoebe was already unbuckled and running toward the entrance. Frank, the weekend security guard, waved at us and opened the door. "Mr. Thorne." He nodded. "Everything's ready. Thank you, Frank." Callahan took my hand. "Come on." I let him lead me through the familiar hallways, past the front office, past the library, down the hallway toward my classroom. The door was closed. Callahan stopped in front of it. "Okay," he said. "So, I know the wedding is next week, and I know we're getting married in this classroom, but I wanted to do something special, something just for us." He opened the door. I gasped. The classroom had been completely transformed. Fairy lights hung from the ceiling, creating a canopy of stars. Photographs covered every surface. Pictures of Callahan and Phoebe. Pictures of me with my students. Pictures of the three of us over the past year. The evolution of our family captured in hundreds of moments. The alphabet rug in the reading corner had been decorated with rose petals arranged in a heart shape, and in the center of that heart stood a small table with 2 chairs. "What is this?" I whispered. "This is where it all started," Callahan said softly. "Right here, in this reading corner. Phoebe asked you an impossible question, and somehow, impossibly, you said yes. Not that day, but eventually, you said yes to trying, to hoping, to taking a chance on us." He led me into the room. Phoebe followed, uncharacteristically quiet. "I wanted you to see this," Callahan continued. "Wanted you to see what I see when I think about us. All these moments, all these memories, this whole year of falling in love with you." The photographs were chronological. I could see the progression. Early pictures where Callahan and I stood carefully apart, both of us guarded. Middle pictures where we'd started to relax, to lean into each other. Recent pictures where we looked like what we were, a family. I made that one. Phoebe pointed to a drawing tacked up among the photographs. It was her picture from that first day. 3 figures, Daddy, Phoebe, and me. "You saved this?" I asked, touching the worn construction paper. "I save all her drawings," Callahan said. "But this one was special. This was the day I started to hope that maybe Phoebe was right, that maybe you were supposed to be our family." I felt tears streaming down my face. "There's one more thing," Callahan said. He walked to the reading corner, to the table I'd noticed. On it sat a photo album I'd never seen before. "I made this for you," he said. "For us, so we'd never forget how we got here." I opened the album with shaking hands. The first page had a single photograph. Phoebe on her first day of kindergarten, standing outside the school, looking nervous and brave. "That was the day she met you," Callahan said quietly. "The day everything started to change." The next pages documented our journey. Pictures I didn't know he'd taken. Me reading to students, laughing at something Phoebe said, looking at him when I thought he wasn't watching. Each image captured with love and attention and care. Halfway through the album, the pictures changed. Now they included all 3 of us. Our first dinner at the pizza place. Phoebe's sick night, a selfie Callahan had taken while I slept on his couch. The farmer's market. Movie nights. Ordinary moments made extraordinary by the fact that we were together. The final page had a photograph from last week. The 3 of us in the park, fall leaves scattered around us, all of us laughing at something Phoebe had said. We looked happy, complete, like we'd always been meant to be together. Below the photograph in Callahan's neat handwriting were words that made me cry harder. The day a kindergarten teacher met a billionaire single father who would change her life forever, and the 5-year-old who knew before anyone else that they were meant to be a family. Callahan. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. I know the proposal is supposed to happen next week, he said, during the wedding, in front of everyone. But I wanted to do this first. Just us. Just our family. He dropped to one knee right there in the reading corner where it had all started. Phoebe, he said. Come here, sweetheart. Phoebe joined him, kneeling beside her father. Briar Parker, they said together, clearly having rehearsed this. Will you marry us? I laughed through my tears. You already asked me this. I already said yes. We know, Callahan said. But that was asking future you. This is asking present you. Right now, in this moment, in this place where it all started. Will you marry us? Will you be Phoebe's stepmom and my wife, and part of this family we're building? Phoebe held up a second ring. A smaller, simpler band. This one is from me, she said seriously. Because Daddy's ring is for being married to him. But this one is for being my mom. Well, my stepmom. But really just my mom because I don't remember my other mom very much, and you're the one who's here. My heart broke and healed simultaneously. I dropped to my knees to be level with both of them. Yes, I said. Yes to both rings. Yes to all of it. Yes to being your family. Callahan slipped his ring back on my finger. Phoebe slipped her ring on my other hand. Then we all hugged there in the reading corner, crying and laughing and marveling at how far we'd come. This is where I asked you the first time. Phoebe said, remember? You were reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I remember. I said, I thought you were crazy. I wasn't crazy. Phoebe said indignantly, I was right. You were absolutely right. I agreed. You're very good at knowing things. We spent the next hour in that classroom, drinking coffee that Callahan had brought in a thermos, eating donuts that Phoebe had picked out, looking at all the photographs and memories displayed around the room. Can we keep it like this? I asked. For the wedding? That was the plan. Callahan said, if you like it. I love it. I said, it's perfect. The wedding itself, 1 week later, was everything I'd never known I wanted. The guest list ended up being exactly 50 people. Callahan's parents, his sister who flew in from Boston, Mallory and a few other close friends, Mrs. Henderson from Callahan's building, Frank the doorman, who cried through the entire ceremony, some of Phoebe's classmates with their parents, a handful of Callahan's actual friends, not business associates, Principal Hendricks, a few teachers from Meadowbrook Elementary, intimate, meaningful, full of people who'd supported us through the journey. The classroom looked magical. Callahan later admitted it was a team of professional decorators he'd hired, had enhanced the fairy lights and photographs, added elegant touches that complemented rather than overwhelmed the space. White flowers in simple vases, chairs arranged in a semicircle around the reading corner. I got ready in Principal Hendricks's office with Mallory and Phoebe. My dress was simple, ivory lace, tea-length, elegant but not ostentatious, comfortable enough to wear in a kindergarten classroom, perfect for someone who valued substance over show. Phoebe's flower girl dress was, as requested, very sparkly. She twirled in front of the mirror. I look like a princess, she announced. You are a princess, Mallory agreed, adjusting Phoebe's flower crown. A princess who arranged her dad's wedding, Phoebe said proudly. I'm very good at that. Yes, you are, I said, kneeling down to her level. Thank you, Phoebe, for being brave enough to ask me that impossible question. It wasn't impossible, Phoebe said seriously. I knew you were supposed to be our family. Some things you just know. Music started playing in the hallway. A string quartet. Callahan had spared no expense on the musicians, playing something beautiful and classical. That's our cue, Mallory said. You ready? I looked at myself in the mirror, looked at Phoebe in her sparkly dress, thought about Callahan waiting for me in the classroom where this had all begun. I'm ready, I said. Phoebe went first, scattering rose petals with theatrical flourish and announcing to anyone who would listen, I made this happen. I asked Miss Parker to marry my daddy. Then it was my turn. I walked down the makeshift aisle, past the alphabet rug where I'd taught hundreds of children their letters, past the art station where creativity bloomed daily, past the science corner where curiosity was encouraged, and there, standing in the reading corner where Phoebe had first asked her impossible question, stood Callahan. He wore a dark gray suit. Simple, elegant. His eyes were suspiciously bright as he watched me walk toward him. When I reached him, he took both my hands. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi," I whispered back. "You look beautiful. You look pretty good yourself." The officiant, a friend of Callahan's from college, cleared his throat. "We're gathered here today," he began, but I barely heard the traditional words. I was too focused on Callahan, on the way he was looking at me like I was the most precious thing in the world, on Phoebe standing beside us, beaming with pride, on the friends and family surrounding us with love and support. The vows were next. "Briar," Callahan said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "A year ago, my daughter asked you an impossible question. She asked you to marry me, to save us from our loneliness. And you could have run. Should have run, probably. But you didn't. A few people laughed. Instead, you stayed. You saw past my grief to the person I was trying to become. You loved my daughter without trying to replace her mother. You taught both of us that it's possible to honor the past while embracing the future. You showed us what it looks like to choose bravery over fear." He squeezed my hands. "I promise to see you, really see you, not just the teacher or the stepmom or the woman who fits into my life, but the complete person you are. I promise to support your dreams even when they don't make logical sense. I promise to always make space for your books." Everyone laughed again. "I promise to choose you every single day, in the big moments and the small ones, when it's easy and when it's hard. I promise to build a life with you based on authenticity, not performance, to value substance over show, to remember that the best moments aren't the expensive ones, but the ones where we're just us." Tears were streaming down my face. "My turn." "Callahan," I said, my voice shaking. "When Phoebe asked me to marry you, I thought she was crazy. I'd sworn off love, built walls around my heart, chosen safety over risk, but she saw something I was too scared to see. She saw that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself hope again." I looked at Phoebe, who was crying happy tears. "You taught me that broken pieces can be put back together, that second chances are real, that family isn't about biology, it's about showing up. I promise to choose courage over fear, to trust when trusting is hard, to love openly instead of guardedly." I looked back at Callahan. "I promise to see Phoebe as the gift she is, to honor Annalise's memory by loving her daughter fiercely, to never try to replace what came before, but to build something new and beautiful alongside it. I promise to call you out when you're being an idiot." Callahan laughed through his own tears. "And I promise to remember that love isn't about perfect timing or logical decisions. Love is about choosing each other every single day, in 1,000 small ways. That's what I promise you." The officiant smiled. "Do you have the rings?" Phoebe stepped forward importantly, carrying the ring pillow we'd let her pick out. It was shaped like a rainbow, very on brand for a 5-year-old. Callahan slipped my engagement ring off, replaced it with the wedding band, then put the engagement ring back on. "With this ring," he said, "I choose you." I did the same for him, sliding a simple platinum band onto his finger. "With this ring," I said, "I choose you too, by the power vested in me." The officiant said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Callahan pulled me close and kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around us, our 50 favorite people cheered. Phoebe jumped up and down. "They're married," she announced to anyone who would listen. "I made this happen." The reception was held in the school cafeteria, transformed with the same elegant simplicity as the classroom. Round tables with white linens, simple centerpieces, twinkling lights, a cake that was half traditional white wedding cake, half chocolate, per Phoebe's insistence. We ate, we danced, we listened to toasts. Mallory stood up first. "I've known Briar for 15 years, she said, "and I've never seen her as happy as she's been this past year. Callahan, Phoebe, thank you for loving my best friend the way she deserves to be loved." Callahan's sister went next. "My brother has been through hell," she said bluntly. "Losing Annalise nearly destroyed him. But watching him rebuild, watching him learn to hope again, watching him find love with Briar. That's been the greatest gift. Then Phoebe asked for the microphone. I'm 5, she announced, almost 6, and I asked Miss Parker to marry my daddy because he was really sad and she looked like someone who could make him happy. And I was right because I'm very good at knowing things. Everyone laughed. Also, Phoebe continued seriously, Miss Parker is now my mom, not my teacher anymore, just my mom. And I think my other mom would be really happy about that because she told me before she died that Daddy deserved to love again. So this is a happy day for everyone. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of joy. Dancing with Callahan, dancing with Phoebe, dancing with both of them at once, cutting the cake, feeding each other bites while Phoebe made gagging noises. As the evening wound down, I found myself standing in my classroom. Our classroom. The place where everything had started. Callahan joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind. Happy, he murmured into my hair. Deliriously, I said, terrifyingly, completely. Good, he kissed my temple. Because I plan to keep you this happy for the next 60 years. Only 60? I'm being conservative. He laughed. Fine. 100 years. Deal. We stood there in comfortable silence, looking at the fairy lights and photographs, and the reading corner where Phoebe had asked her impossible question. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For being brave enough to let me love you. For trusting me with Phoebe. For seeing past my walls to the person I was trying to hide. Right back at you, he said. For staying when you could have run. For loving us even though we came with complications. For choosing hope. Phoebe found us then, sleepy and happy. Can we go home now? She asked, yawning. I'm tired from all the wedding stuff. We can go home, Callahan said, scooping her up. All 3 of us. Home. As we drove through the city, Phoebe fell asleep in the back seat, still in her sparkly dress. Callahan held my hand. The wedding rings caught the streetlights, sending small rainbows across the car interior. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the heartbreak that had made me build walls, the little girl brave enough to ask an impossible question, the man willing to wait for my fear to transform into hope. I thought about Annalise, who I'd never met but who I honored by loving her daughter, who'd given Phoebe permission to help her father find love again, who'd been wise enough to know that love doesn't end when someone dies, it just changes form. And I thought about the future stretching ahead of us, the ordinary moments that would become extraordinary simply because we'd share them, the challenges we'd face and overcome together, the family we'd continue building, day by day, choice by choice. Best proposal ever? Callahan asked quietly, glancing at me. I thought about it, about the traditional proposal with the ring and the romance, about the surprise proposal in the classroom, about all the small proposals we'd made to each other over the past year, the daily choices to stay, to trust, to love. The best proposal, I said finally, was the one from a 5-year-old in a kindergarten classroom who refused to let the adults in her life stay broken. Everything else was just details. Callahan smiled. Phoebe would be pleased to hear that. We pulled into the parking garage, carried Phoebe up to the penthouse, now officially our home, put her to bed in her purple room with the glow-in-the-dark stars. Good night, Mom, she mumbled sleepily. The word hit me square in the chest. Mom. Good night, sweetheart, I whispered, kissing her forehead. Thank you for being so brave. Later in our room, Callahan and I stood by the window looking out at the city. Mrs. Thorne, he said, trying out my new name. That's going to take some getting used to, I admitted. We have time, he said. The rest of our lives, actually. The rest of our lives. It sounded like a promise and a gift and an adventure all at once. 6 months later, on a regular Tuesday afternoon, I stood in my kindergarten classroom with a new group of students. 25 5-year-olds learning their letters and numbers and how to navigate the complicated world of friendship and feelings. A little boy named Christopher approached me during quiet reading time. Miss Thorne, he said, I changed my name after the wedding. Can I ask you something? Of course, Christopher. My dad is really lonely, he said, his eyes wide and serious. He's sad all the time since my mom left. Do you think you have any friends who might want to marry him? I felt my heart clench with recognition and compassion. Oh, Christopher, I said gently, kneeling down to his level. I understand you want your dad to be happy, but Marriage isn't something we can arrange for other people, but it worked for Phoebe, he said. She told me about how she asked you to marry her dad, and now you're a family. I smiled. Phoebe's situation was very special and very unusual. But you're happy now, right? Christopher pressed. You and Mr. Thorne and Phoebe? I looked at the reading corner where it had all started. Thought about my life now. Waking up next to Callahan every morning. Phoebe calling me Mom. The ordinary magic of our daily routine. The extraordinary gift of second chances. I'm very happy. I confirmed. But Christopher, the best thing you can do for your dad is just love him. Be there for him. Let him know you care. The rest will work itself out in time. Christopher looked disappointed, but nodded. That afternoon, when Callahan picked up Phoebe, I told him about the conversation. Another matchmaking kindergartner, he said with amusement. Should I be worried? Absolutely not, I said, kissing him. I'm a one matchmaking kindergartner woman. Phoebe overheard. Are you talking about me? Because I am very good at matchmaking. I should probably start a business. You're 6, Callahan pointed out. You can't start a business. I could be a consultant. Phoebe said seriously. I helped Miss Thorne, Mom, find you. I could help other people find their families too. Let's maybe wait until you're at least 7, I suggested. Fine, Phoebe sighed dramatically. But I'm going to be the best family consultant ever. You'll see. That night, the 3 of us had our traditional Taco Wednesday dinner. Phoebe told elaborate stories about her day. Callahan and I exchanged amused glances over her head. After dinner, we watched a movie. Phoebe fell asleep between us on the couch as she often did. Callahan carried her to bed while I cleaned up the kitchen. When he returned, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. Happy? He asked, the same question he'd asked on our wedding day. Deliriously. I said, the same answer I'd given then. How about you? More than I ever thought I'd be again. He said honestly, you and Phoebe, this life we've built. It's everything I didn't know I could still have. We stood there in comfortable silence, his arms around me, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. Thank you, I said softly. For what? For asking me an impossible question. I turned to face him. For trusting a kindergartner's wisdom. For being patient with my fear. For showing me that some risks are worth taking. Right back at you, he said, kissing me gently. For saying yes. For loving us. For being brave. Later, as I lay in bed waiting for sleep, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From broken and closed off to whole and open. From terrified to trusting. From alone to belonging. I thought about the moral I'd learned, the one I'd someday share with my students. That second chances are real, but only if you're brave enough to take them. That children sometimes see truths adults deliberately blind themselves to. That family is built through daily choices, not just biology. That the best kind of love finds you when you need it most, often delivered by the most unexpected messenger. And I thought about Phoebe, asleep in her room, dreaming her big dreams. The 5-year-old who'd refused to let the adults in her life stay broken. Who'd asked an impossible question and changed everything. Some things. Phoebe had said that very first day. You just know. She'd been right. The best proposals didn't always come from adults on bended knee. Sometimes they came from kindergartners with wisdom beyond their years and hearts big enough to heal 2 broken people who'd forgotten how to hope. Sometimes love found you in a kindergarten classroom during quiet reading time. Sometimes a child's desperate plea became the catalyst for the most beautiful beginning of all. And sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible questions had the most perfect answers. Yes, always yes. To love, to family, to second chances, to hope. Yes, if this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and the wisdom of children and love that heals, share it with someone who needs hope today. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be loved again. Subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips for more stories that remind us what really matters. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a child teach you something profound about life and love? I'd love to hear your stories, because in the end, that's what we all need. Connection, hope, the courage to say yes to love even when it terrifies us, and sometimes the wisdom to listen when a 5-year-old tells us exactly what we need to hear. This is the story of how a kindergarten teacher met a billionaire single father who would change her life forever. But more than that, It's the story of how a brave little girl refused to accept that love only happens once, how she saw past the walls and the fear and the grief to the possibility of healing. It's the story of how impossible questions sometimes have the most beautiful answers. And that was the most perfect beginning of all.